if you don't like living with mom and my sister, you can sleep in the yard. Michael, grinning with an evil look, seemed to say, you can't really do that, can you? For him, I was just a convenient wife, and mocking me like this was his hobby. But I couldn't take it anymore. Then I'll start sleeping outside from today on. Don't complain about who I sleep with, okay? At my words, Michael scoffed through his nose. However, the next morning, after seeing the yard, Michael became frantic and regretted his words. My name is Gina Manning, a 42-year-old freelance illustrator. At this age, I have built a career that allows me to earn a decent income working from home. I lived in the city with my husband, Michael. We didn't have children and enjoyed our carefree life as a couple. I wanted children, but Michael disliked them and adamantly refused to have any. However, Dorothy, my mother-in-law, wouldn't try to understand our situation. A daughter-in-law who doesn't give birth is useless. In the old days, you wouldn't be able to complain even if you were divorced. Every time we visited my in-laws, Dorothy would taunt us with a nasty smirk. Hillary, my sister-in-law, was just like her mother, also very sarcastic. A freelance illustrator? That's just an extension of child's play, isn't it? Getting paid for doodling, how enviable. But you don't really earn much, and you're just leeching off my brother. After all, you only finished high school. What a difference from someone who graduated from college like me. Unaware of how much I actually earned, she would say such things nonchalantly. For the record, my salary was about the same as Michael's, who worked as a full-time employee. During busy periods, I earned even more than him. Unbeknownst to Hillary, who looked down on me for my educational background. She herself was not employed permanently. She claimed she could become a regular employee anytime she decided to get serious. But at 35 years old, I thought it was high time she did. The only decent person was my father-in-law, who always defended me when the two taunted me. Gina is a precious daughter from another family. Don't say such rude things to someone who has come to our family as a bride. His words would quiet them down for a while. However, not liking that he took my side, they secretly continued their harassment afterwards. It was a vicious cycle, but I was saved by the presence of my father-in-law. One good thing was that my in-laws lived far away, accessible only by train, so we didn't meet often. I usually shrugged off their taunts. Then one day, while I was working at home. What, your father has passed away? I received a sudden call from Michael during work, informing me of this shocking news. It seemed that his illness had progressed without my knowledge. With the funeral preparations and other tasks, I had no time to mourn as the days were hectic. I couldn't return home for a while because my mother-in-law and Hillary left all the troublesome matters to me. I was exhausted by the amount of paperwork and procedures that had to be dealt with in just a few days. After managing to send off my father-in-law, I thought I could finally settle down and mourn. Only mom and my sister are left in that house. I'm worried about the two, so we're moving back to my hometown. What? You're springing this on me all of a sudden. What about my job? Then, Michael, puffing out his chest as if proud, dropped a bombshell. Don't worry, a classmate of mine runs a company back home and he agreed to hire me. Everything is already settled. You work from home, so it doesn't matter where you live, right? There's no problem, so relax. Michael had made all these arrangements without my knowledge. Then, ignoring my reluctance, he proceeded with the moving preparations. Reluctantly, I too started preparing for the move. At first, Michael insisted on living with his parents. But I firmly refused and decided to stay in this house. Eventually, we signed a lease for an apartment a bit away from his parents' house. And started a new life there. However, after moving, my mother-in-law and Hillary, having nothing better to do, came to our house frequently and interfered with my work. They weren't working, so it seemed they had too much free time on their hands. I hinted several times that their frequent visits were inconvenient. But my hints were too subtle to be understood. Almost every day, the two would come over and do as they pleased. The stress didn't end there. When people in the neighborhood saw me, they would whisper to each other. People from the city stand out, don't they? Gina, it's you. You need to make an effort to blend in. When I discussed this with Michael, Dorothy and Hillary made snide remarks in his presence. Am I really sticking out? Between the stress from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, and the absence of any allies in my surroundings, I sighed heavily, regretting the decision to move to this rural area. That day, without any particular need, Hillary and my mother-in-law came to the apartment again. Is there no candy in this house? What an inconsiderate daughter-in-law. We are guests, you know? It's normal to have some prepared. While rummaging through the cabinets and complaining, my mother-in-law was an unwelcome guest, to say the least. I sighed inwardly. Hillary sat down in a rude posture and said to me, "Hey, Gina, give me some money." What? I'm going to the city to hang out. I'm meeting up with a friend there and we're going to a theme park. So, I need travel money. Unabashedly asking for money, I was dumbfounded and retorted. How about getting a serious job and earning your own money? Then you'd have more money to spend freely. At my words, Hillary exploded. She stood up from her chair abruptly and banged on the table, yelling at me. You're trying to lecture me. Someone like you, a mere high school grad, lecturing me. A college grad is a million years too early. Know your place. Upon hearing this, Dorothy, who was listening, let out an exaggerated sigh. Exactly, Hillary is right. Honestly, the audacity of a daughter-in-law acting so high and mighty. After all, the money you're hesitating to give is earned by our son, isn't it? It's not your money, yet you dare to act so high and mighty? Dorothy puffed out her chest as if she had spoken a great truth. Apparently, the two of them knew nothing. Michael had just switched jobs to a company run by a classmate in his hometown, and was making less than before. As a result, the allowance Hillary was demanding would have to come out of my wallet. But explaining this to them would likely fall on deaf ears. I'm sorry, I'm busy, so please go home now. I somehow managed to drive the two of them out after they continued to grumble and complain. As I watched them leave noisily, the door to the next room opened, and a neighbor with a troubled look emerged. Could you please keep it down a bit? It's quite loud. Ah. I'm so sorry. It wasn't me who was being noisy, but I had inadvertently caused trouble for my neighbor. I had been trying to live quietly up until now. I sighed deeply once again. A few hours later, I reported the day's events to Michael when he returned home. There are neighbor issues since it's an apartment, right? No, that's not the problem. I was about to ask him to speak to the two of them. But Michael cut me off with a beaming smile and said something unbelievable. I've been thinking this place is too cramped. You think so too, right? Well, that's why I bought a house with a yard. He said it in a casual tone, as if he had just bought some sweets on his way home from work. It was so unexpected that I was momentarily unable to grasp what he meant. You bought a house? Wait, what do you mean? It was a used one, selling cheap. I managed to buy it with my savings. I then pressed Michael on why he had made such a major purchase without consulting me, saying it's normal to discuss such things before buying. However, it seemed to have no effect on Michael. He was ecstatic about owning our home and brushed off my lectures. I was dumbfounded and almost lost my mind, but what was done was done. As Michael said, the apartment felt cramped, so living in a house would be okay, I convinced myself. A few days later, we moved from the apartment to the house we had bought. However, we were greeted by Dorothy and Hillary, who were also moving in. What's going on? When I asked Michael in a trembling voice, he replied nonchalantly. Oh, didn't I tell you? They'll be living here too. The old house has gotten old, so we're going to demolish it and sell the land. I've already signed the construction contract and started the land sale process. Wait, why didn't you tell me? As I felt dizzy with the unbelievable reality before me, Michael spoke in a light tone. Well then, I'll tell you now. Mom and my sister will live with us. If you don't like it, sleep in the yard. Michael grinned nastily, seeming to say, you can't really do that, can you? At that moment, something inside me snapped. Then I'll start sleeping outside from today on. Don't complain about who I sleep with, okay? As if I would complain. Do whatever you want. As we argued, the two of them watched, laughing joyously. Yay! Now that the nuisance is gone, we can use the house more freely. Why don't you just go back to your parents' house? Ignoring their mocking laughter, I moved my belongings to the yard. Then I made a call to prepare for sleeping outside. The next day. I slept well. I stretched mightily in the yard of the house Michael had bought. It felt like I had slept well for the first time in a while. After I moved my belongings outside, Michael spitefully closed all the curtains of the house. So, he didn't seem to know I was actually in the yard. However, he couldn't keep the curtains closed forever. Morning came, and Michael opened the house curtains. Seeing the yard, Michael's face showed shock. What is that? Well, you said not to complain about who I sleep with, right? Michael, with trembling hands, pointed at my side and exclaimed. Even so, who brings such a big dog into our yard? My pet dog, called it the big dog, wagged its tail in response. This dog is a Rottweiler from my parents' house. Rottweilers are classified as giant breeds. Then, I set up a huge tent I had brought from my parents' house in the yard. And spent the night there with my dog. Later, I explained the situation to my mother over the phone and borrowed the tent. And my dog to spend the night here. It was a perfect opportunity since the yard was spacious enough for tent camping. And my large dog could enjoy the space freely. My dog loves being outdoors, so as I expected, it was very cheerful yesterday. I too had a fun night and was in a good mood this morning. However, Michael was pale and clearly not pleased. That's your family's dog, right? Take it back to your parents' house right now. Yes, Michael is terribly afraid of large dogs. Bringing my dog was also a form of payback for Michael. Michael apparently was chased by a large dog as a child, and since then, even the sight of one scares him. This has led to my brother having to take our family dog away whenever my parents visit. But let's set that story aside for now. Upon hearing Michael's scream, Dorothy and Hillary sleepily rubbed their eyes and came out to the yard. What's all the yelling about this early, Michael? Why is there a dog in our house? The two of them cried out pitifully. They too are not fond of dogs, and they grimaced just hearing that my family had a large dog. Now with the dog suddenly in front of them, they were clearly flustered. Together with Michael, they became nearly hysterical, demanding that the dog leave the house. What are you thinking? This is why I hate low-educated high school grads. It's unbelievable, really the worst. I never thought I had such a crazy daughter-in-law. Who does this kind of thing? They are right. What are you thinking? Have you finally lost your mind? While I remained silent, the three of them continued to berate me. It's noisy this morning, isn't it? You think so too, right? As I petted my dog, it wagged its tail vigorously. This dog has a large body but a gentle personality, and is very smart and kind. However, he shows no mercy towards anyone who harms the family. can't you hear us telling you to leave? As Michael lashed out with his harsh words, my dog growled by my side. At that sound, Michael let out a pitiful scream. And noise came from the large tent where I had been sleeping. It's lively this morning.
Ah.
Dad, good morning. What? Emerging from the tent was my father. Michael, not expecting my father to be there, exclaimed in a ridiculous voice. Oh, Michael. Good morning. My father greeted him with a smile, but Michael stood there with his mouth agape. I'm hungry. Steve, you ate a lot last night. Next, my brother, Steve, came out of the tent. Though married and living elsewhere, he came when I told him yesterday. Then, since we're all here, let's have a family camp in the yard. If anyone tries anything, we'll be safe with us around. So, we decided to camp out as a family. Good morning. It seems my daughter has been quite the host. Last to emerge was my mother. She smiled refreshingly appropriate for the morning, but her eyes were not smiling. When I told her the situation yesterday, my mother was the most angry. She doesn't show her emotions loudly like Michael's family, but she harbors a quiet rage. The look she gave my in-laws was icy. Father, mother, and brother. It's been a while. Michael's earlier bluster was gone, and he attempted a strained smile. He can act tough with me, but not with my father and brother. The reason being, both are considerably well-built, and Michael is intimidated by them. My father, a muscular military personnel, still works out daily and was even a triathlon award winner last year. My brother is a current police officer who keeps our town safe and, influenced by our father, also regularly works out. His wife and daughter may be exasperated by how much he exercises. But to me, he's a reliable brother. The family dog they walk is also impressively muscular, having kept up with their intense exercise routines since it was a puppy. Well, I have many things to say, but first, thank you for letting us use your yard. Thanks to you, we've had a wonderful time as a family. When my mother politely expressed her gratitude, my mother-in-law, almost involuntarily, responded with a "You're welcome." Despite being surrounded by muscular men, my mother holds the highest position in our family hierarchy. Our dog, too, is most attached to her and sees her as the leader of the pack. Even now, it sat well-mannered by her side. Both my brother and father say, no matter how much they train, they can't surpass our mother. She may not have physical strength, but she shows her power when it matters. Once, when I was bullied in elementary school, she confronted the teacher immediately and dragged the bully's parents to the school. Enough formalities. I'd like to hear why you treated my daughter so poorly. Please, don't hesitate to explain. Though she smiled throughout, her presence was overwhelming, and eventually, both the bully's parents and child ended up crying. That was when I vowed never to anger my mother. If I had consulted my family earlier about my troubles, my parents and brother would have supported me. But I didn't want to worry them. I wanted to reassure everyone that I was married and living happily. Thus, even when my mother-in-law and Hillary harassed me, and Michael made unilateral decisions about moving, I consulted no one. When I finally called my mother yesterday, she was both angry and worried over the phone. You've always been patient, my dear. But I can't stand seeing you suffer because of it. After all, you are my precious daughter. I am a grown adult, not a child under my mother's protection. But hearing her words, I almost cried, deeply regretting not having consulted her sooner. Now, my mother faced the in-laws with the same smile she had when confronting the bully's parents. This was one of the few times she had interacted with them since our wedding. They had hardly met since then, so they probably never imagined she could be so formidable. I've heard from inside the tent all the insults you threw at my daughter, calling her low-educated, crazy, and more. Now, please enlighten us as to why you felt entitled to speak so rudely to my daughter? Her tone was polite, but the pressure left no room for argument. Her eyes remained stern, and every time she spoke, the air seemed to cool further. Glancing at my father and brother, I noticed their complexions paling even though they weren't the ones being scolded. Our family dog, too, seemed intimidated, looking nervously at my mother. The in-laws, on the other hand, were all ghostly pale, facing the brunt of my mother's anger directly. No, mother, it's not like that. Gina and I were just having a small argument. Oh? A small argument, you say? Michael scrambled to explain. But the cold voice and stern face returned by my mother only made his complexion worsen. Then, in a twist, Michael directed his frustration at me. You. It's sneaky to bring your family into this. However, I was unfazed by Michael's accusation. Well, you're with your family, aren't you? It's not sneaky or anything of the sort. My quick retort left Michael at a loss for words. He desperately wanted to outsmart me, but he was clearly at a disadvantage. After a moment's thought, his face suddenly brightened as if he had struck upon a great idea. And he declared confidently, "Enough, I want a divorce. Doing whatever you like in my house, I can't believe it." It sounded as if he believed he had one. Could it be that he saw divorce as his trump card? Thinking I would be shocked and apologize if he mentioned it? By now, I felt nothing for Michael, my love for him had dried up long ago. With an air of disdain, I slowly opened my mouth and dropped a significant bombshell. You can divorce if you want, but you'll be paying for your affair in compensation. Huh? Did you think I hadn't noticed? In a small town like this, everyone knows you're cheating with a woman from your workplace. It was bound to come out. Indeed, Michael had been having an affair with a woman in her 30s at the company run by his classmate. The woman was also married, which would only magnify the scandal once it came to light. My suspicions had been raised due to his late returns home, and the discovery of a woman's handkerchief and a hotel receipt in his pocket confirmed my suspicions. In this small town, there was no detective agency, so I had to investigate on my own, finding ample evidence of his infidelity. This evidence will ensure a solid claim for compensation when presented to a lawyer. Then, let me introduce you to a lawyer I know. Really? That would be helpful, Dad. Michael, clearly not expecting his affair to be discovered, turned as pale as paper. Yet he wasn't ready to give up and tried to defend himself with a trembling voice. It's your fault. You're always busy with work, and you never pay attention to me. My brother immediately countered this argument. My wife works full-time too, but not paying attention is no excuse for infidelity. What a selfish reason. Disgusted, my brother looked at Michael. Being a married man himself, he couldn't understand Michael's reasoning at all. He's right. You're the one without any prospects. Which is why my daughter has to work so hard. If you were a dependable husband, none of this would have happened. My father quickly supported this, attacking Michael further, with reasonable arguments coming from both sides. Michael could only move his mouth without forming words. His mother and sister tried to defend him. It's your daughter who is to blame, obviously. We'll hire a lawyer and claim compensation too. That's right. Even if she works hard, her job isn't anything special. My mother countered their words without hesitation. Feel free to hire a lawyer. But it's absurd for someone who cheated to claim compensation. I pity any lawyer who takes on such a case. Do you even understand basic social norms? Taken aback by my mother's sharp words, Dorothy involuntarily stepped back. And Hillary, do you know how much my daughter earns? Just search her name, and you'll see she works with reputable companies. And you speak so grandly, aren't you too old to be living off your brother and his wife? Isn't that shameful? Hillary blushed deeply the moment she understood my mother's words. How can you say such horrible things to my family? Michael glared at us, struggling to contain his anger as he watched his mother and sister being thoroughly rebuked by my mother. Though my mother was only speaking the truth, Michael disliked it intensely. Facing him, I sighed deeply before speaking. Honestly, why did I ever marry someone like this? I'm astounded at my own lack of judgment. What did you say? Have you forgotten what you've done to me? Convenient memory you have. And those two, they've been worse to me than my family ever was. Calling me a lowlife high school grad, a useless wife because I can't have children. Since moving here, you've treated me like a convenient servant. Compared to them, don't you think my family is quite reasonable? I let out all the frustrations I had been holding back. Until now, I hadn't wanted to worry about my real family, enduring everything silently. But there was no need for silence anymore. Let's divorce, Michael. I'm done being exploited by you and your family. Wait, Gina. Let's calm down and talk this over. There's no need for further discussion. I want to sever ties with you as soon as possible. No amount of talking will make me forgive what you've done. You and your family should prepare for the consequences. With my final words, Michael collapsed. His mother and sister slumped their shoulders, drained of strength. We quickly began packing up to return to my family home. Well, I'll be going back to my parents' house now. I'll formalize the divorce and compensation claims later. Though I called out to Michael and his family, there was no response. I sighed softly, packed my belongings and the tent into the car, and left the in-laws' house behind. Later, I successfully divorced Michael. Having an experienced lawyer introduced by my father proved effective. The in-laws were always bold against me but thoroughly weak when faced with an authoritative third party. My demands for compensation were accepted just as I wished. However, Michael had just bought a house and had no savings left. He tried to borrow money from a classmate who had employed him. But this ended disastrously when his affair with a coworker came to light, infuriating his classmate. As punishment for disrupting workplace discipline, both Michael and his affair partner were fired. Desperately, Michael borrowed money from the only consumer finance company willing to lend to him to pay the compensation. However, this company was notoriously ruthless, and he struggled just to pay the interest. Meanwhile, the woman he had an affair with was also divorced by her husband, who then demanded compensation from Michael. Burdened with paying double the compensation, Michael ended up selling the house he had just bought to cover the debts. Having sold his house, Michael moved into a cheap, run-down apartment with his mother, Dorothy, and sister, Hillary. He managed to find some part-time work, but it was clear he was living a pressured life. Hillary finally decided to start working, but with no significant work history. She struggled even to land a part-time job. Dorothy registered with a senior employment service. But jobs were scarce in the countryside, and ultimately, Michael had to support all three of them. Given his meager part-time wages, maintaining even a basic lifestyle was a struggle, let alone supporting three people. During the days I was moving my belongings out of the in-laws' house, a neighbor approached me. "You're the new lady who moved here recently, right? You're Ms. Manning from that house, aren't you?" "Yes, that's correct." The neighbor, looking concerned, shared with me. That family, the mother and daughter, are somewhat notorious around here for being mean and acting superior. We were all quite worried about you. Are you okay? If you ever need to talk, I'm here. When I first moved here, I thought the locals were wary of me because I was an outsider. But it turned out they were just concerned for my well-being. Realizing this, I couldn't help but smile. I'm fine, thank you very much. When I told the neighbor about my divorce, she looked genuinely relieved and expressed her happiness for me. I felt a pang of guilt for ever thinking I shouldn't have moved to the countryside, and silently apologized in my mind as I left the in-laws' house for the last time. Without the burdens of Michael and his family, this place could have been lovely. After moving out and completing the divorce and compensation claims, all that remained was to wait for the installment payments of the compensation. However, on the last day of the compensation payment, Michael sent me a message. This is the final compensation payment. The purification is done, right? Let's start over. I had left Michael's contact unblocked until the payments were complete, but receiving such a creepy message made me deeply regret that decision. Start over? What kind of punishment game is that? Not for all the money in the world. Don't ever contact me again. If you try to get in touch, I will consult my lawyer. After sending that message, I immediately blocked Michael's contact. From then on, he had no further involvement in my life. After divorcing Michael, I returned to the city and began living a comfortable, self-sufficient life. I used some of the compensation to treat my supportive family to a fancy trip, creating a lifetime of happy memories. Freed from the need to care for Michael's family, I now had both the financial and emotional space to live freely. While I could dive back into work, I found I no longer needed to work desperately. My finances were stable without supporting the in-laws. With no obligations toward the in-laws, my finances were more relaxed. And after the failed marriage with Michael, I was open to finding a better relationship. In the city, being single in your 40s isn't uncommon. And there seem to be many opportunities for dating parties aimed at this age group. It would take some courage, but I was planning to attend one soon. Never again would I let myself be taken for granted. Remembering that I am the only one who can truly cherish myself, I looked forward to living a fulfilling life, enjoying every moment to come.